Welcome to Building Institute Aotearoa and the Industry Insights. Today we've got a fabulous conversation for you about the Archives Building here in Pōneke, Wellington. And we're very lucky to have three guests with us. We have Alex Hampshire, Hanna Hawke and Linda Wong. But before I let them introduce themselves, I've got you captured, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening at the Building Institute right now. So today, if you're in Ōtautahi Christchurch, there's the Building Legends event around complex risk and contracts. And coming up in Wellington and Auckland in October, we've got the Building Legends series around managing teams through uncertainty and complexity. Some of you might be managers, so worth having a look into that. That's 8th of October in Wellington, 15th of October in Auckland. And this week in Auckland, which I'll be at and really looking forward to, is the Fisher and Paykel building. It's a mass timber building in Auckland. We have got a wait list operating for that, but by all means jump onto that. And for those that enjoy building their social capital outdoors, we have golf days coming up, the 17th of October here in Pōneke, Wellington, and the 31st of October in Ōtautahi Christchurch. Guaranteed to be good weather, and we put on some great food and beverages. Right, into the archives conversation. So today we have Alex, Hanna and Linda. Alex, can you kick us off and just tell us a little bit about your role, how you were involved with archives, and after introductions we'll come back to you for a little 101 about the project. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pam, and hi everyone. It's great to be here. It's a project that's very close to my heart, so I do enjoy presenting on it and talking about it. As Pam's just mentioned, my name's Alex. I'm the Director for Advisory at WT Partnership here based in Wellington, and specific to this project, my role was the advisor for asset and facilities management, or pretty much operations, you would probably better describe it. So my role was to basically sit on the design team and make sure that what we built was going to be able to be operated, maintained, and that includes things like asset replacement and how we get to certain things in the building. And then we had a few other roles, which was procurement of the facilities maintenance contractor, and we're also involved in the DLP process to make sure that basically everything is going smoothly into operation. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome, thank you. Hanna, tell us a bit about your role.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks for having me. Kia ora koutou. My name is Hanna, and I'm one of the BIM managers here at McGuinness in Te Whanganui, Otara. My role on the Archives project was to be the construction phase BIM manager for McGuinness. So in a very much support role with the subcontractors. I think I started right as they were installing the last space isolators on the project, and before we really got into services coordination and going up the building. Yeah, so I was my role really was to transfer some of these design processes that had been established during design and to bring them to the site team. So coordination processes, things like that. And as we went along, I started to work with Linda and Alex more closely in the asset data capture process. And really my role there was to get the information from Alex and to convey that to our subcontractors in manageable bite-sized pieces that didn't seem overwhelming to them. Yeah, that's pretty much me.
Awesome. Digital on site. And Linda.
Thanks, Pam. So hi, my name's Linda Wong. I'm an architect and I have run a practice called Wong Workshop here in Pōneke, Wellington. It's really great to be a part of this webinar today about talking about a project that I've really enjoyed assisting on, and it's a very special project for me. So my background, I run an architectural practice, but for quite a few years I've also done commercial advisory work that's been on the back of some international work experience that I had working in Asia and the United States. So I first became involved in the Archives project about 3 years ago, assisting and supporting LT McGuinness in risk assessment and documentation review. And that migrated into supporting LTs also with the facilities management, asset data migration and capture process. So yeah, I worked quite closely with both Hanna and Alex on designing the process based on the WT asset data requirements and delivering something quite unique, a digital deliverable in construction.
Awesome. Look, I think it's definitely the unique aspect that we're really interested in, and we're digging today into the digital delivery and specifically around how that's worked at site through the construction period. Some of you would have heard about archives before. It's a bit of a golden child in our construction landscape because I heard that it was delivered on time and on budget. Alex is going to give us a little bit of a 101 overview about the project for those that don't know. And some of you might have heard a little bit because we had a digital panel at Digicom in March earlier this year. And just keep in mind, Alex is on the Archives Banter train wagon at the moment. He's done about 50 of these events and tells us this is about the 10th of his webinars. So Alex, the expert on archives.
Oh, you're talking me up now, Pam. I better deliver. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, look, before we get into the kind of digital aspect, which I think is what this webinar is aimed at, it's probably worth just understanding what archives is. And so what archives is basically they are the guardians of New Zealand's kind of documentary heritage and record of government. And what they do is basically hold all of our irreplaceable tonga, and the value of which is pretty much, you know, invaluable. You can't really value it. It's billions and billions of dollars. And the reason why they have to do that is because, in theory, it keeps our government to account. We hold things like historical records on decisions. One of the things during the design process that I didn't know they held was human remains for cold cases. The really old cold cases. So if you've got a cold case that needs reopening and we don't have the you know, human remains available to do testing on and things like that, then you're not going to be able to reopen that cold case. So it's a really important job that they do and role that they play, and then that feeds into the requirements for the building. So this building is obviously based in Wellington. It's 20,000 square meters. We've just achieved a 5-star Green Star rating. It's 8 stories, but it's got enough steel for a 30-story building. It's got the second biggest base isolators in the world and the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere. It's got one of the most complex facades ever built, to the point where you can turn the HVAC off and the building won't deviate by more than about 0.2 degrees over 48 hours, depending on the outside air temperature. That was the results we got during testing. It's got a dry pipe double knock fire system, and kind of the list goes on. Really, it's one of the most complex and resilient buildings you are really ever going to find. To put it in context, if Wellington has a big enough earthquake where all the buildings fall down, and unfortunately, you know, we're all not here anymore, that building will still be completely happy and just carry on as normal, probably until it runs out of fuel from its backup power system. But that's by the by. The building will be fine. So when you put all that into context, then you kind of go, well, okay, how do you design, how do you operate, and how do you make sure this building stays functional throughout its life? obviously the best possible price, then you kind of go, well, probably the answer to that lies in technology. And that's certainly the answer we came up with through the design period. Really, it was quite an iterative process. We didn't know we were going to end up going down this incredibly complex digital design path, but we did know that we were going to use BIM extensively through design and construction. So we already knew that, and really it was a case of going, right, well, how far can we take the digital aspects of this design and construction and use it in operations? And that's where basically the kind of reverse engineering from a piece of technology that runs the building, and when I say runs the building, I mean runs it more than just what a BMS does, and you kind of reverse engineer that back to the design phase. Then you go, right, well, what do we need to implement this piece of technology? And what you need is an awful lot of data. You need a really aligned team between your design team, your construction team, and your FM team. And so we put all of these pieces in place, and I think, the end result is quite a unique, and as far as I'm aware, kind of first in New Zealand digital process that we've achieved. So hopefully that gives everyone a bit of a snapshot.
Yeah, that's great. Look, there's two really strong points I took from that. One of them that's new to me, which is this is the ultimate time capsule, isn't it? So after the coming of the next ice age, when the aliens come back and unearth, they'll find archives. Maybe not much else, but must be really good to know that you've contributed to that. The other aspect that's so interesting is the reverse or the back to front design of this project, because it's been designed for facilities management, hasn't it? I guess one interesting question for you, Alex, before we jump into what that actually looked like for the contractors to deliver, is how early was that decision made, and how was that decision made? Who needed to be on board? Was it just simply the client or someone else?
Yeah, good question. I mean, the answer to the timing is, and for anybody wanting to do this in the future, the answer is as early as possible. The idea that construction and operations are two separate functions, I think, is an idea that's starting to be quickly debunked. I don't think they can be. I think the quicker we can get to the point where we consider all construction as whole of life construction, the better we're going to be as a world that goes across the world. So the process really was Bob Hall, who many people on this call will know. He was involved in the early stages, and really it was his decision to say, look, this building is so critical and there are so many requirements during operations, we really need to build it for operations, not build it for construction, if you like, which that probably seems like I'm doing a little bit of disservice to the design and construction sectors, but I think one of the lessons that we've learned is the two are not mutually exclusive. You absolutely can have operations and design for operations and still get a beautiful, well-built, functional building. It's not one or the other. You can have both. It's just typically what we've done is we've never really included operations at the design table. So, the answer to the question is, I think, the earlier you do it, the better the outcome. There are an awful lot of things that you gain throughout the process. So, for example, if you specify data requirements early enough and you put that into your design through the Revit process, we as sort of FM managers or asset managers, we can extract that out, and then we can do a whole of life costing at every design drop. We could do it every single day if we really wanted to, because all we're doing is extracting asset data out of a Revit model, applying fairly industry standard metrics to it, and that gives us a whole of life cost. And then you can take that whole of life cost and you can actually then sort of go, well, how does that benchmark a cost, against, say, a hospital or a school or whatever you want to benchmark it against. But then you can kind of do VE based on whole of life as well. So we're not just doing VE based on, does this, we need to save $5 million because it's over our budget. Let's get rid of a lift, or let's get rid of a roof anchor system, or whatever the case may be. You can do a whole of life cost benefit analysis and go, well, actually, yeah, you might be saving yourself $2 million during construction, but you're going to end up costing yourself $15 million during whole of life. So your decision-making points change if you implement this process early enough.
Awesome. I really love what you're talking about, which is designing for a building that's alive as opposed to designing for a static artifact. Look, I think the real learning here for us is how the design, how the digital aspects are brought to life through the construction process. And Hanna, I'm really interested in the role of the main contractor here and how you managed to engage the subbies on this process. How did those conversations go?
I think initially that some of our challenges were around subcontractors not being familiar with BIM and BIM processes at all. And so I think us as contractors, once we sort of understood what we had signed up for, was about educating them and communicating these goals that the client had set out for us, which was to create, quite a special building that had very specific requirements. And so, I think we advanced our own digital capabilities as well as them. Like, we really brought them on the journey. We focused on communication and training with them, and we broke down the requirements into simple, practical steps that the model could be used for more than just asset data at the end. It could be actually help them on site, so they could avoid clashes and rework, and then by integrating the model and digital technologies onto site, the team started to see like these real benefits, and the engagement with BIM and these digital processes just really grew naturally from there.
Great. Massive education process, isn't it, when you're doing a one-off, first of its kind building? Linda, you're also in that kind of interface between architecture and construction. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that panned out for you?
It was, yes, it was, I think, one of the key observations looking back at the process that we went through on archives with respect to the capture of asset data is that it really was taking, in a very short period of time, set time frame of construction, an entirely new design process that was based on the client brief, which was Alex's team's asset data requirements, interpreting a brief that had not a physical design outcome, but a digital design outcome, a digital deliverable, designing that process within construction, and then communicating how to price it, how to achieve it, and how to deliver it through the main contractor to the sub-trades and then back to the client. It was an entire design process within the construction process. So just the perspective of a construction project is no longer just a linear process of taking a client's brief, going through stages of design, building it and delivering it, but you've actually got these mini processes that can then be embedded within, and there could be several. I think that the just opening up that possibility that as we move into a more digitally based building industry, that we're going to see more of that, and that interdisciplinary interaction is not only, it's challenging, but it's also really refreshing. Like, it was great being able to get the opportunity to work closely with WT and LTs on this project, because as an architect, you don't often get the chance. As consultants, we don't get the chance to work in across disciplines. Learning about facilities management actually makes practice better in the design space, and working closely with the contractor also helps with that understanding and communication. And hopefully you take that forward to the next project as well. Communication was a huge part, I think, of what made archives successful. We had to, in this very unique process, a unique brief, have really clear communication lines. So, to give you an example, through construction, as we were delivering and testing and iterating how we were going to gather data, migrate data, deliver data, the LT's team and the WT team and I were meeting pretty much on a weekly basis to troubleshoot, to go over things. It was very much a open door, complete honest conversations about what was working and what wasn't. And I think that really made the process better because we weren't assuming we knew what the answer would be. We were actually creating it as we were going. And in the end, I think it did make the end product better because we weren't afraid to ask those questions and see opportunities.
I think that's awesome because it's such a complex project, and usually in complex project we have that kind of over the fence mentality, don't we, of handing things down the line with the idea that it will end up at facilities management. But to have them all squashed up together is a really interesting approach. I'm curious, you just met more often, like every week. Was there something different about the way you worked, or is it really about the trust that you established and the flow of communication?
I think that the frequency in which we met certainly built a lot of trust. And another takeaway I'd say from the process, looking back on it, is that we were very much led by, this was a digital deliverable. No question that we were leaning very heavily on digital processes, on technology, and folding all of that in. But at the heart of it was a very clear team structure and a lot of communication across lines. So we were talking about each other's expectations and what we could achieve and what we couldn't all the time. And I think that just made things so much better. We could actually see the opportunities because we're having these in-depth conversations on a regular basis.
Yeah. The thing that's so fascinating about this is that often people get drawn into the digital conversation because of the flashy widget. And I have to say, you guys have got a really flashy widget. That twin view model, and I know during Digicom you panned right in and showed us like a heat pump or something, and we could see the serial number and everything, and everyone in the room was like gasping. But the real the stellar standout here is the people, because the data is simply allowing the transparency that lets you create the trust to have a really good human collaboration, and that's how complex projects get delivered on time and on budget, I've heard. But so there's something really lovely to the human aspect alongside the digital, and I think it's good that we keep focusing on that and don't lose sight of that. I guess a little bit more to nuts and bolts. Hanna, I'm interested in the data capture process which you were involved with. Can you tell us a bit more about literally how did the heat pump details get into the model?
So basically, Linda took Alex's very extensive asset information register and broke it down into individual spreadsheets for the subcontractors, and so they would try not to overwhelm them and everything, but basically to get the information about a heat pump or a light or anything like that, they created their models, they're really advanced models, over the course of their shop drawing process, and we coordinated them to a very high level because I think we understood that this was necessary to get this accurate information to Alex at the end of the process. And so Linda extracted the data, the raw model data, pretty much, matched them up with Alex's expectations and produced these amazing spreadsheets. And then post-shop drawing phase, the subcontractors started to enter the data. They entered it manually into these spreadsheets, and then Linda worked her magic and produced these amazing models that have really a lot of data in them. But as you're creating these models, as you're going along, your data is constantly building. You're putting more and more information, more specification information, and things like that, which all become useful for facilities management in the end.
I think just to add to that as well, Pam, one of the key sort of things that has happened on archives that we typically don't see in others is the extent that BIM was used in the shop drawing process. And I think if you think about how data works in either Revit or TwinView, it's attached against a model element. So we have data against a model element, but you can only attach that data to a model element if you model the element. And what typically happens is, even if you get a really detailed BIM model at detail design, that then gets handed over to a constructor or an alliance or a PPP, and the shop drawing process isn't nearly as in depth as what we've had on archives. So you lose an awful lot of detail within the model to be able to attach data against. And I think in this example, and one of the great things I think that happened was a workshop between WAMTech, LT McGuinness, and the LT subcontractor pool, where we all got in a room and we explained our individual parts of what we're trying to do with this digital journey, and they could buy in, and I think it broke down a lot of barriers to them being able to call. So if one of LT's subcontractors needed to call me directly, they could just pick up the phone, because we'd already had this workshop and they could see what we were trying to achieve and understand the benefits that we were trying to realize. And I think that was I think that's a really key point to make in this process as well.
It definitely added to the success, I think, by bringing everyone along with the journey. Because, I think, the subcontractors, it's just such a new process for them as well. So to understand it from a very, to break down the barrier between client and subcontractor, or contractor and client, I think that added to it.
Yeah, that's that classic kind of know your why thing, isn't it? The Simon Sinek. I mean, Linda, what else would you add in there?
It's actually, I was just thinking about Simon Sinek, actually, Pam. Answering the why was so critical, I think. There was, because the requirements, that the client brief from WT was so specific, even though it was so new and so different to anything that we'd seen on a construction project before in terms of deliverables. We understood why. So from absorbing what was needed, I could then communicate to Hanna and the rest of the LT's team and to their subtrades why we were doing this. Because often one of the roadblocks when you're doing something new and intimidating like this is, why on earth would you gather this data? Why would we spend all this time? What is its value? And it was very clear all the way through the process that we knew why we were doing it. And I think that's why everyone bought in to the process. Certainly not overwhelming the sub-trades with what they had to do, and just staying on track with entering data in a very unintimidating way, because of the sheer volume of what we're asking for, was really important. But in hindsight, I think that now those same sub-trades would probably feel far more comfortable in terms of delivering a quantum of data like this, or even entering a process where you're talking about doing different things to a model or adding information to a model. I mean, I think that LTs did a fantastic job of bringing their subtrades along on that journey. And so everyone in the industry gets to benefit from that because we've evolved through this process. Another iteration of, the construction industry has more knowledge as to how to do this better the next time, potentially. And that education, knowing that you've been part of the upskilling of a whole section of the industry is pretty cool. It's pretty special, and hopefully it will just continue.
Absolutely, and we'll absolutely get to the skills bit in terms of the next generation in a bit. But just first of all, Hanna, in terms of being at site, is there anything we need to know about the digital tools you were using in day-to-day construction?
So I guess to support our subcontractors even more along this digital journey, we had what we called a digital station on site, so that the model was available for our site teams to view and to hold toolboxes in front of. So I think that really helped the site teams to understand that the model was so important, and that we had done all this work to make it coordinated, and that we were going to hold them to that in their installation, and so just having that as an accessible tool was great. I mean, you saw really senior site managers from your subcontractor teams, and they're in there looking at the model and making sure that they're installing correctly. That was really amazing for me to see. And then we use things like the digital layout tool, so a total station. And I think I ended up setting out 88 kilometres of track for the shelving to go in off this tool that basically sets out points from the model. So we definitely utilise things like that. And then for the asset data capture process, we had the augmented reality app from Rivisto. And so what I did sort of before handing over the data to Alex was go through a QA process where I went on site with the model and checked that yes, there were 6 lights in each room, or yes, there was a FCU in that space, and just so that we could feel confident that what we were going to provide to Alex and his team was going to be accurate enough for them to view in twin view and be able to go and find these elements that might need to have maintenance against them or things like that. So that's what we really utilised on the site.
Awesome. I'm really curious about the lessons learned, because this is a massive scale project, possibly a once in a lifetime one. I think, Alex, you said you jumped in about 6 years and it had already been going for a couple. So it's a huge project. I'm really interested in how do we scale or reuse the things that you've used so that they're applicable for smaller or different kinds of projects. And I know you mentioned the health sector. Alex, do you want to kick us off in that area?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I think you could break down what we've done here and find an awful lot of things that you could reuse on certain projects. Replicating exactly what we've done in the exact same way probably isn't necessary. But what is necessary is, for me, most of my consultancy work is in the asset and facilities management sector, and typically we are facing a world where there isn't enough money to maintain what we've got, and I believe the reason for that is because we don't have the ability to manage it. You can't manage what you don't know. So having information on every asset and every asset system in every building is critical to being able to manage a portfolio of buildings properly. I mean, if you listen to the Honourable Mr. Bishop recently, he talks about the police portfolio, and according to him, police don't even know how many buildings they have, let alone what's in them. So we've got a very wide-ranging scale of very little knowledge to almost too much knowledge, and I think archives is probably at this end of the scale. But so I think if I was to sort of say lessons learned, it would be in that data space, and it would be around one of the things that really surprised me early on was the fact that Revit didn't just automatically spit out what I would call an asset register. So the reason why I had to get, or we had to get Linda and LTs to collect all this information was because we didn't have the granularity of detail in Revit. And I think it can be done. It's just clients don't typically specify that early enough for architects and services and designers to put the information in from concept design when they're building their Revit models, which is an iterative process. And I think if we did that, yes, it would add a little bit more cost up front because it's time and therefore cost for a design team to do that. But what you would get out the back end on every project in the country is this perfect asset register, which then gets passed on to the maintainers for the next 50 years. We're not talking about we only use it for a year. We use that is the basis of how we maintain buildings for the life of the building. And so and it gets updated. So when we do capital planning, we do capital planning based on the asset register and the condition data of the individual asset. And you can update the condition data against the asset information requirements. But if you don't have an asset register, you can't do that. So look, for me, the biggest lesson learned is I think this is a use case in proving that it's doable to get the data through construction and deliver it before PC, which is what we did. And I think the benefits of that are just exponential in terms of how much money we spend as a country on maintaining our assets.
Awesome. Hanna, how would you distill the lessons learned? Is there anything you would do differently next time?
Oh, I don't know if that I would do anything differently, to be honest. But I just think that through the process we've learnt a lot, and we've grown our digital capability as a company now. I think that potentially we might bring more things in-house, which is what we're developing at the moment, such as just modeling in this digital model first approach and growing our digital roles within our company. I think if we can, what we've learnt from third-party support and from Linda and Alex is that we are quite capable, and that's an exciting journey to be on as well.
That's great. I think the internal capability thing's really interesting. I'm going to ask you about that and the digital cadetship idea in a minute. But Linda, first of all, in transferring from a novel project to repeatable lessons, what would you pass on?
So I think working on a novel, complex project like archives probably reinforced some thinking about what designers, consultant teams can do that often we forget or we don't capitalize on as much. I feel that we were able to successfully deliver what we did with respect to the asset data on archives because personally I felt like, and professionally I was leaning quite heavily on architectural skills, architectural problem solving, just problem solving in general. And that design thinking was really important, being able to take something unfamiliar and break it down and into a process that was legible, that was deliverable, that was not intimidating and everyone could actually believe in, was one of the, I think, big takeaways for me. For others, other designers or architects, consultants to really look at the internal skills that we have, that internal knowledge, and being willing to have those conversations with each other and interdisciplinary conversations, talking to people on site, or your installers or your builders or your colleagues. It sounds really simple, but actually having really good communication still is as important, if not more important, when you've got a quickly changing landscape of how we're using digital tools. We don't want to. I think the only way to really capitalize on them is to be sharing that knowledge personally between each other, not just necessarily relying on the tools themselves, but actually communicating about how we're using the tools and how to get the best out of them. The Archives project does set a really high bar, which we may not end up achieving again in terms of its digital outcomes and how we delivered it. But I think just not losing sight of how important we are as a team, how we work as a team is I think what I'd take forward from it. So any new process that gets put forward on a project, and I'm sure there will be more, particularly in terms of data gathering or use of databases, just not being afraid of looking at that as a designer and breaking that down.
Nice.
Not putting ourselves in a box with respect to what we can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of new in this project, isn't there, which is fantastic. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more of distilling the lessons learned over the coming months and years even. Alex, we'll just go to you for one of our last questions before I do a quick wrap up. The million-dollar question, the multi-million-dollar question. People are interested in what is the cost as a percentage of the total build. Can you give us any magic insight there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't say the cost, but I can say it as a percentage of the bill. I mean, it would be 0 point something, probably in the region of 0.2 to 0.5. I think cost is often a barrier to doing anything differently than we've done before. But based on what we've done, I think we've got to advertise this as, being cost is not the barrier, because it really isn't. It was in comparison to the build cost, it is so small to implement this process, and it has so many benefits that it's honestly just a no-brainer. And if you then compare it as a percentage of whole of life cost and the reduced whole of life cost that you gain from implementing the method, it would be in the 0.0 something percent of cost. So it's
cost is a blood stick, isn't it? It's really value. What do you call value? The value here for an owner operator is very clear, obviously.
The question is how much is an owner willing to spend on making sure their OPEX is 30% lower than it potentially would be? Well, the answer is probably 1% of OPEX. And I can tell you right now, this costs a lot less than 1% of OPEX.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing.
Yeah.
We'll just take that as gospel. Look, actually, I did have another question. Sorry, I'm just going to circle back. I told a fib. It wasn't the last question. Hanna, we were just talking before we started this webinar about the role of digital cadetships and the idea that in the future, anyone that's on site will have a lived experience of a BIM manager role or something. Is that something that you're looking at LTs? Is that right? Or is there anything you can tell us about how this is going to turn into your skills program in-house?
Yeah, I guess I just through our experience at Archives and seeing how we can grow our knowledge, we now want to share that with the wider community in some way. And one of the thoughts around that is digital roles in construction. And so I think we're in the process of developing a cadetship which will be offered to school leavers. And they will be able to get a taste of all the different digital roles that LT has today, which is, I think we've got a Revit technician, we've got survey technicians, we've got BIM managers, we've got design managers, with services managers. So we've got a lot of these roles that are very much digital focused, and now we want to, I guess, share those pathways for like new pathways for new jobs.
Yeah, that's awesome, because that's a very deliberate segue into a project that we've been working on for the last 12 months, which has been called the Construction Career Pathways. It's about to be launched actually in one of these online sessions on Thursday, the 23rd of October, and it's called the Built Environment Career Streams, and it's got 8 professional roles from architecture and engineering and QS and project management and construction management through to facilities management, including building officials and BIM managers. But the next 3 months of research, which will be released early 26, is going to have much more about those really specific digital roles. So some of those ones you just mentioned, Hannah, which will be really cool when that comes out. But for those that want a sneak peek, we'll have that live on our website actually now for signing up for that free event on Thursday, the 23rd of October. And the day before, it's a double banger that week, we've got an AI special with Justin Flitter from NZAI and Maria Mangalan from the AI Forum. And for anyone, I know this is a bit time specific, but for anyone who might be in Auckland tomorrow and wants to go to the AI Summit, that's going to be a really interesting day. And we're going to have a panel on the architecture, engineering and construction sector and what's happening with AI, or could happen with AI in our sector. So maybe populating the twin view model might go a little faster next time. Who knows? That's something for another day. Look, thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Alex. We've really enjoyed the conversation. I know we've only scratched the surface, but the good news is you'll have more archives webinars to talk at to come, probably for years. So thank you so much for joining us today, and everybody else, you'll see this recording coming up. We'll pop in some other interesting links. I've heard there's a really good YouTube about the move from old archives to new archives. And in case you were wondering, that's apparently a 2-year journey. So we'll pop all that up on the website, and just wanted to say thanks for coming and see you next time. Ka kite anō.